Say what? Hey everyone, it's Steph. I'm going to be talking about the reading rush today, so thanks so much for tuning in. If you like this video, give it a like or hit that subscribe button. So without further ado, let's get on to the reading rush. The first prompt for the reading rush is to pick a book that has a cover that matches your birthstone. Because I have an emerald birthstone, I picked the Radiant Girls because I found that that was available on audiobook from my library. Second of all, a book that begins with the, torn between Handmaid's Tale or The Lost Lieutenant. I did start The Lost Lieutenant this morning, so I'm excited to see if I can get through that, but I do want to get to the Handmaid's Tale. Maybe I'll be really extra and do more than one. We'll see. Then we have a book that's inspired by a movie. I picked The Princess Bride, which I'm excited to get to. Number 4 is The First Book You Touch. I have this one, Natures and Morals. Started reading through this. The format of it reminds me very much of APA papers that I read in grad school. Really intelligent insights into Jane Austen's writings. I have read all 6 of Jane Austen's novels. That helps that I've had contacts. I understand the thematic elements he's talking about. He talks about first Pride and Prejudice, which is my fave. Jane Austen had 6 novels. If I can get through a book a day, then I can get through this during the reading rush. So I'm psyched about that. The book that's to be read outside of your house, I have Misery by Stephen King. It's something that will be totally different for me. Giving it a shot. Number 6, a book that you want to read more of. The book I had in mind for the 6th one, the 6th prompt, is Wuthering Heights. And I was like, Wuthering Heights, yeah, I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna figure out what it's all about. Check that off the Gilmore Girls reading challenge. Read more classics, yeah. After making that video and editing it, I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna start it because I feel like it's gonna take me forever. It's like a 14-hour audiobook. Yeah, I got through that in 3 days. Like, I finished it this morning on the first day of the readathon. So I just feel like, well, I'm not going to count that as my readathon, but I did want to tell you guys a few of my thoughts. I knew that it was about a relationship that was unhappy. Spoiler alert. So fast forward if you don't want to get spoilers. What I thought was a love story, even a tragic love story, they end up killing her off like halfway through the story. Say what? Okay, well, this is a gothic novel, so maybe her ghost is going to be there and be like a pivotal part of the story, or affect Heathcliff's decision making. There's a little bit of that theme. It does pop up again at the very end of the book, but it's much more about the destructive nature of Heathcliff's negative attitude and the way he treats other people, and you understand why he's doing it, but that doesn't mean it's really great. So, not a happy book. Second half of the book follows the children as they're growing up of Heathcliff and Catherine. It's like, okay, where is this going? Why should I feel invested in these characters? And then things start to get interesting, and then we have somebody who's kind of held hostage until they do something that Heathcliff wants them to do, and until he can acquire the lands that he wants to acquire. He's got such a bitter heart. I'm just like, Heathcliff, man, like, have you not found any kind of ray of sunshine in your life at all? No. Interesting conclusion with the whole gothic nature, and he's like haunted by her ghost and seems kind of not himself, not all there. That seemed more along the lines of playing into the gothic nature of the story. Why do you tell your audience that Heathcliff has died before you get any of the events leading up to his death? That decreases any sense of anticipation for me as a reader. And what am I reading around to see what plot elements happen if you've already given away the most pivotal plot point there is to the end of the story? Felt anticlimactic in that way. The rain and the graveyard. That played into the gothic element for sure. And those are the themes. I'm like, okay, this is what I expected. This is gothic and dark and whatever. I just felt that giving away your plot of him dying and then spending so long building up to like that actually occurring felt like it was out of order and backwards for me. So took away slightly from the ending for me, but so glad I read it. I figured out what this book was all about. Prompt number 7 was to read a book that takes place on a different continent than where you live. So I'm going to take a look at these books and figure out, oh, The Lost Lieutenant. The Lost Lieutenant takes place in England. Okay, perfect. This is a reading rush. Day 1. Here we go. I read a little bit of this. Read a little bit of The Lost Lieutenant this morning. Finished Wuthering Heights. Good luck to all my friends who are doing this reading rush. I look forward to seeing what everybody does. Alright, let's get started. So just a quick check-in. I have listened to about 2 hours now of the Radiant Girls while I've just gone around the house and done stuff. Holy moly. It is astounding. So the beginning of this book talks about this factory that is using radium in order to make watches luminescent readable in the dark so that soldiers in World War I can read their watches anytime, day or night. Side effects that these women who are working in the factories are starting to realize are going on in their body, going to doctors, or just saying, oh, it's just this small thing, which is very treatable. Oh my gosh. The audiobook narrator is doing a really, really great job of making the content interesting, the development of radium, the understanding of what radium does to the human body. I will say this, for a nonfiction book, the topic of the book, it has me very riveted. It's very attention-getting, and it's holding my attention very well. I'm about 2 hours in, under 14 hours left, and I'm listening to the audiobook at 1.5 speed, and it's fine, and I'm not rushing it.
By the April of 1923, Zamatolsky had completed his tests. As he had suspected, there was not a single trace of phosphorus in the luminous paint.
So that's another thing they're talking about, the dangers of phosphorus. These girls who'd been exposed to radium started exhibiting these symptoms. It's just shocking to see how many people suspected something and said nothing, or just brushed under the rug for the ability to make a few extra bucks. And the people who got caught in the middle were these factory workers. It's important to know what we as a society have learned about mistakes in the past so that we can avoid making that in the future, improve ourselves and our society, and look out for the safety of all people. I think this is an important thing to be reading, and I think this is an important thing to be informed about. Knowledge is power, right? What I've listened to so far have really just blown my mind and just really kind of broadened my scope of understanding about the world in the early 1900s. I will check in with you guys later and let you know my progress, and that'll be the end of day 1. Okay, so I didn't record anything on day 2 of the reading rush. I will fill you in on where I'm at. So I'm almost done The Lost Lieutenant. I've been reading that a lot today. I'm really enjoying it. Published this year, so it's pretty new. I really like the 2 main characters, secrets on both sides. So I'm enjoying it. It does have some fresh elements that I've seen that aren't in the typical forced marriage trope. So I'm enjoying that. I'm interested to see where it goes, and then I'll kind of give you my final verdict on it. I did want to tell you that last night at the end of day 2, I finished listening to the audiobook of Radium Girls, and it was so good. It was fantastic. Super interesting look into what it was like for these girls between like the 1910s and 1930s working with radium. And my only other experience schema of radium in general is the Curies. You know, Marie Curie and her husband Pierre discovering radium in like late 1890s. Really interesting to see a group of young women who are working in the factories, painting the faces of watches and making the numbers iridescent, luminescent, so that World War I soldiers can read them any time of day. Interesting concept. Then we really see this turn into a story of social justice. Women who are getting sick from the radium, and it astounds me that the paintbrushes that they dipped in the radium paint, they were taught to twist it, swirl it in their mouth, and dip it in the paint, and then paint the number. So they did this repeatedly. They'd put the brush in their mouth, put it in the radium paint, put it in their mouth, radium paint, and then actually paint the watch. It's just insane, the stuff that these girls were going through, and of course the suffering as a result of the exposure that they had to the radium, which is just heartbreaking. As people start to make connections between, oh, it's all these people who worked at the factory using the same paint and the same process to paint. It takes a really, really long time to even start to get the legal wheels turning to get justice. To see these women, zoom in on these stories of these different women who actually lived, see how strong and courageous they were to stand up for injustice so that future generations would not suffer the way that they suffered. And it really, really, really makes you feel like you're walking along with these girls to work, to the doctor's offices, trying to figure out what's wrong with them, trying to treat them, and then trying to fight for justice. It was such a well-done book. It made history come alive. This isn't just a painting of someone from another time period, a statue of what someone did in one moment. It's like day in and day out, this is what these people lived with, and this is how they fought back from injustice. And this happened, and this shouldn't ever happen again. So well done, so well written. If you are even remotely interested in reading the Radium Girls, definitely check it out. Princess Bride is on hold. I'm hoping I can get it before the reading rush is done. And then the one book that I already had, the Jane Austen inspired one, I still have to get back to that one and keep reading through it. Reading rush, day 3, yay! is almost complete. I'm hoping to get The Lost Lieutenant done and maybe get to the next book as well. Alright folks, tune in with you when I have some more reading progress. Hope everyone is having a good time with their reading, and I will chat with you guys soon. This is the end of Reading Rush day number 4. I just want to give you a little update on where I'm at. I am having a late night snack, so life is good. I ended up finishing The Lost Lieutenant this morning. I did feel like I was losing interest a little bit. We kept waiting for like the big momentous occasion to occur. There's a lot of build up to it and not a lot that actually happened. But we finally got both these main characters to reveal their secrets and to kind of see each other truly for who they are. Wasn't my most compelling Regency romance read, but it was one that I still enjoyed reading. So I'm glad I gave it a shot and got to try it out for this readathon. So that counts for number 2, a story that begins with the word the, and then number 7, a story that takes place on a continent other than where I live. Then on to my newest book. My cereal's getting soggy because I'm talking instead of eating my cereal. Out of my original books, we have Radium Girls, The Lost Lieutenant, Princess Bride, On Hold, Natures, and Morals, which I am in the process of reading. I am going to read a little bit of that hopefully tonight. And last but not least is the one I was anticipating the most or most nervous about, the Stephen King book. After I finished The Lost Lieutenant this morning, I thought, you know what, I'm gonna read a few chapters, pace myself to get through the story. I told myself, okay, read the first 10 chapters since they're short, and then you go on your way and read the whole book today. Here I was thinking like, oh, when I take breaks over a few days, I'll pace it out and I kind of check in with you guys to see what my thoughts are along the way. Nope. I was planning to, but I just couldn't put it down. I had to see what was happening next. I had to see a resolution, kept hoping for a positive resolution. I was reminded at the end of this book why Heart isn't my favorite, because at the end, you either have like a really depressing ending or you have an ending that is sad or bittersweet, and if somebody survived it, then that means they've got like all this trauma and like challenges ahead of them to like walk through. I did find the story very compelling, sucked me into the story. I wanted to know what happened. First half of the book was more like a thriller, more of a suspense kind of book. The second half, I can see why it's classified as horror, because it gets a little bit more gory, gets a little bit more involved. And those are the portions once it started to get more detailed. I just started to skim through that. It's not my cup of tea. I still want to know what happened to the characters, and so I just kept reading. I'm glad I read it. I'm glad it's done. It does show someone with mental illness. I wanted to read it while it's still light out, and I'm glad I did, because I've had a few hours to process it and I tuck it in the back of my brain. I'm glad I gave Stephen King a shot. The suspense of wanting to know the resolution is what kept me reading. And I do have to say, for as much as Stephen King has some really twisted ideas, it kind of makes me question who would come up with something like this. But anyways, I digress. He does have a ton of literary references in this, a lot of references to Arabian Nights, a lot of references to View to Alice in Wonderland. Know there more. He is describing within the story what it's like to write a story from start to finish. I thought it was an interesting look into how fandom can go too far and how one can become obsessed with books that they read or the characters that they read. Obviously that's to an unhealthy level, but to a very small degree. I think we can all relate that we have books that we love, or books that seem to have characters that come more alive to us as we're reading, or stay with us after we read and we think about those characters and get kicks and giggles out of them, or things that stay with us and haunt us about different characters. So I think it's an interesting look into how fiction carries over into real life. So that's my reading progress. Just want to keep the momentum going, so to speak, kind of like running a marathon, I guess. It's just an interesting little observation I've noticed during this challenge. So that's my conclusion to the end of day 4. I might post the first half of the reading rush and then the second half of the reading rush if this video gets long, because I try to keep my videos kind of short. That's the end of day 4 for the reading rush. Thanks for watching, and I will clue you guys in next time. See you soon!